in the car, and this was the report. As I got to the car, oh, and he had Newt's children with him, by the way, when he brought the papers. As I got to the car, I saw Newt in the passenger seat and one of the guy's wives with her head in his lap going up and down. Newt kind of turned and gave me his little boy smile. Fortunately, Jackie, Sue, and Kathy were a lot younger and shorter then. We have this in the book under the category Little Boy Smile. We have the behavior with his wife under the categories hospital visit and ingratitude. Ingratitude because she put him through school and through his first campaign, and when he finally got elected, he dumped her. Married second wife 6 months after divorce was finalized, admitted to 6-year affair during second divorce. Third wife subpoenaed during second divorce trial, but claimed she could not testify because adultery illegal in D.C. Admitted to extramarital affair during Lewinsky scandal, but said the situation was different because he did not lie under oath. So that's perhaps the foremost leader of the Republican Party on the congressional side in the recent era, who's, by the way, making a comeback now. The party is so bereft of people with any intelligence or talent now that he's making a comeback despite this kind of record. And he was one of the leaders of Clinton's impeachment. And he wasn't the only one who was a leader of that movement and involved in extramarital affairs. Bob Barr was, Henry Hyde, the Statute of Limitations fellow, Dan Burton, Helen Chenoweth, one of the 2 women in our book. We only have 2 women out of the 110. But she was preaching against Clinton and against adultery and was having an affair back in Idaho, her home state. Bill Kristol, who's one of the intellectual leaders of this movement and edits one of their magazines, The Weekly Standard, said the following: Republicans have old-fashioned extramarital affairs with other adults. Those really are moral lapses that are private and more easily forgiven, and very different from taking advantage of a young person who works for you when you are president, meaning, again, Bill Clinton. So here's a few things that we have in the book about Republican adult behavior. Conservative commentator arrested for unlawful sexual activity with underage girls. Conservative talk show host convicted of exposing genitals to 11-year-old. Trinity Baptist Church pastor and values crusader arrested for sexual battery of children. State legislator and sponsor of tougher sex offender laws charged with raping foster daughters. Nominee of the NRCC, National Republican Campaign Committee, for Republican of the Year at the time he was nominated, was serving 26 years for sex crimes against children in jail. Creator of controversial anti-Gore commercial, convicted of sexual assault of child. Man who led crusade against gay adoption, supported by Republican officials, molests adopted daughter. Anti-abortion activist who posted a $1.5 million bounty for death of abortion doctors, sentenced for possession of child pornography. Trinity Baptist Church pastor and values crusader arrested for sexual battery of children. Congressman and vociferous gay rights opponent solicited sex from teenage gay nude dancer. Minister who condemned homosexuals sentenced to 10 years in prison for soliciting sex from a male teen. A conservative activist said this. His name is Nicholas Morency. Every day of my life, I pray for those who are the victims of sexual abuse. Here's a headline about him. Anti-abortion activist who I guess that was the same guy. That was the guy I read before. You remember Senator David Vitter, who was found consorting with prostitutes in Washington and in Louisiana. He said, I don't believe there's any issue more important than this one. He was referring to the constitutional amendment banning same-sex marriage. Mark Foley, had said we need to completely change the way we treat sex offenders. They are not petty criminals. This bill, which he was proposing, would make prey of predators who victimize our children. Robert Gray, a pastor, said this: the Bible says that people should love each other and show affection. He said that to a young girl whom he was sexually abusing. And here's my final one in this list. This is again a quote from Newt Gingrich. I think that the mother killing the 2 children in South Carolina vividly reminds every American how sick the society is getting and how much we need to change things. The only way you get change is to vote Republican. He was talking about Susan Smith there, who killed her 2 children. So here's a headline from the book. Chair of South Carolina Local Christian Coalition and State GOP Executive Committee member admits to sexually molesting his stepdaughter. Convicted child killer Susan Smith. There's a list of 5 whom I call the Rogues Gallery. These are the ones that caused me to write the book. These all took place between 2005 and 2007. There was the Reverend Gary Aldridge, a top advisor to Jerry Falwell, who was found dead. He had asphyxiated himself, erotic asphyxiation, wearing 2 rubber wetsuits and flippers and gloves. Dr. David Hager, who was an advisor to the Bush administration on women's reproductive health, who was accused by his ex-wife of raping her anally, both when she was awake and when she was asleep, from narcolepsy and narcolepsy medicine. Neil Horsley, an anti-abortion crusader who admitted to, or bragged actually, about having sex with animals. Ted Haggard, the evangelical leader who was found to have consorted with a male prostitute and taken methamphetamine with him. Finally, Mr. Larry Craig, the senator from Idaho, who provided the title for our book. He of the bathroom at the Minneapolis-St. Paul airport. The title of the book is You Don't Know Me, A Citizen's Guide to Republican Family Values. And when he denied that he was gay, the Idaho Statesman, his hometown newspaper, did a full-bore investigation, found 8 of his male lovers, and one of them said that after they had sex, he was rushing him out of the house as fast as he could, and he said to him, just remember, you don't know me, you haven't been here, you don't know who I am. That's where we took the title of the book. So there's an interpretive part of my book. It's in the introduction. I'm going to read you a few short quotes from some of the studies I bring to bear on the question of what this behavior is all about. I rely in the beginning on T.W. Adorno in his famous book, The Authoritarian Personality, written in 1950. Adorno was a refugee from Nazi Germany who I think was worried that the same thing might happen in the United States that happened in Weimar Germany. The right wing might come to power and institute a dictatorship. And he saw signs of that. I think he was a little bit paranoid, but he and his researchers tried to establish a link between repressed sexuality and right-wing politics. And here's a quote from him. If the anti-democratic individual is disposed to see in the outer world impulses which are suppressed in himself, and we wish to know what those impulses are, then something may be learned by noting what he attributes most readily to others. And here's a list of questions to which his authoritarian subjects, those he identified that way, agreed. Homosexuality is a particularly rotten form of delinquency and ought to be severely punished. No matter how they act on the surface, men are interested in women for only one reason. The sex orgies of the old Greeks and Romans are nursery school stuff compared to some of the goings-on in this country today, even in circles where people least expect it. And sex crimes such as rape and attacks on children deserve more than imprisonment. Such criminals ought to be publicly whipped. That's interesting in view of the catalog that I just read and the percentage of pedophiles who are in my book. A strong inclination to punish violators of sex mores, homosexuals, sex offenders, may be an expression of a general punitive attitude, but it also suggests that the subject's own